Hi there, I'm James Dapperchi, and this is Coffee and a Case Note. Team, today we are going to talk about a trustee, which is someone who holds assets that are beneficially owned by other people, and what happens when the trustee loses the trust deed. All right, so we have this trust. It is established, and over a number of years, the trustee is administering it pursuant to a copy of a trust deed, and that copy is not a signed copy. Things develop, and eventually we are left scrambling to try to find a copy of the signed trust deed that cannot be located. And so what the trustee has to do, if it or she or they or he are well advised, is to come and approach the court for judicial advice. And judicial advice is what it sounds like. You can come to the court and you essentially ask, as a trustee, there are some insolvency rules that can apply for insolvency practitioners as well that are similar. You essentially come to the court, you ask a yes/no question. You arrive and you say, hey court, you use better language than that. Hey court, would I be justified in administering the trust in this certain way? And so the question the trustee asked in this case was, hey court, would I be justified in administering the trust pursuant to this copy of the trust deed, noting that we can't find the original? Now, there's actually a surprisingly moderate amount of case law about what trustees do when they lose trust deeds. And essentially there are two big looming questions that arise essentially out of the law relating to rectification of contracts. We don't have to dive into that too deeply, but essentially what the trustee must prove in order to get a yes answer to that yes/no question I just described to you is to prove to the court that the trust deed did indeed exist, and to provide to the court some evidence of what the content of the trust deed was. Now, what the court is presented with in this case is evidence that the service provider who prepared the trust deed did indeed provide it, and it was settled or commenced. But slightly frustrating in this case, the trust deed service provider doesn't actually, as part of its general practice, retain a signed copy of any of the deeds. But in any case, we've got evidence that it was settled, that it was at some stage signed, but they just don't have the signed copy. We've got evidence of a search conducted through 3 of the former accounting firms that acted for the trustee in its operation of the trust. None of them have a signed copy. And we've also got evidence from the bank that the bank has been operating an account on behalf of the trust, and the bank gives evidence that essentially says, look, we wouldn't have accepted an account being operated like that if we hadn't originally witnessed an original executed or signed copy of the trust deed, and so we must have seen it at some time. Sadly, we don't have it now. And in an interesting sub-issue, the judge, His Honour himself, says, look, even if the bank hadn't given that evidence, I would have taken judicial notice, which is to say, I would have accepted just as a matter of course, essentially. You wouldn't have had to prove that banks want to see trust deeds before they open bank accounts for trustees. I would have just said, yeah, that's what banks do. But in any case, because of those searches that were conducted, because of the evidence in relation to the bank, the court was able to be satisfied that the trust deed did indeed exist at some time, and was also able to be satisfied based on the copies held, including by the original service provider, of the terms of the trust deed. And so luckily for the trustee got the advice it came for, that advice being, yes, you would be justified in administering the trust pursuant to the copy that you've got. Hope that discussion assisted you. I look forward to joining you for another fabulous coffee soon and talking about case notes too. Cheers.